Alright y'all, so this video we're going to be discussing the overall canonicity of Fnaf World, mostly surrounding statements from Scott's interviews as well as a couple others. Firstly, the obvious. He states he never existed in Fnaf. He is not part of the lore. Therefore, Dude is not part of the lore. So at the very least, 95% of the game isn't even canon. This also includes Chipper and the rest of them, as they're supposed to be created by Scott and have come to basically invade the game for revenge. If Scott doesn't exist in the lore, then neither do they, which means no quote-unquote transcending space and time and, whatever other things for all those psycho power scales that actually agree with this type of shit. Secondly, his statements from the interview. He made it very transparent during his interview that while it was intended to be canon, he realized he couldn't reconcile the happy and joyful nature of the game he wanted to make, being Fnaf World, with dark and grim pre-existing games. He states here he wished he had not tried, not attempted to, etc., tie the lore into canon, failing to do so for the aforementioned reasons. He later states that he should have waited until the canon games were satisfied before making the spin-off game Fnaf World, establishing its place outside of the canon lore, and letting him spend as much time as he wanted on this quote-unquote breath of fresh air, which was Fnaf World, without it being rushed to also make a canon game alongside it. Additionally, some will use the clock ending as if it really impacts it being canon at all. It may be one of the only canon things in this game, giving us another angle of the happiest day, so why not? I mean, many books are stated to not be canon, but they still offer clues. This would be something sort of like that. There are also characters like Old Man Consequences who make their first showing here, and some try to argue that makes this game canon. However, his appearance in a game means nothing. It's not the first time that a non-canon character has eventually become canon in a later, part of the series, or later game, or later movie. Given the original intent of the game to be canon, it's only reasonable to assume that this version was intended to be canon, but it still isn't. The version in UCN and such simply exists there, and while similar to the one in Fnaf World, isn't actually the same. It's similar to how two books exist in the same contents, while not actually being physically the same book. By admitting he, quote-unquote, wasn't thinking rationally and that the tone of Fnaf World did not fit with prior titles, Scott was basically acknowledging that any canon connections he tried to weave in there were half-formed and ultimately abandoned due to the limited time he had in order to find a way to reconcile these two completely different ideas. The few canon elements were just remnants of that early concept, but his later reflection in this interview itself makes it clear he no longer considered it a main actual part of his timeline, and instead wanted to distance himself from it as much as possible and basically just used it as a learning opportunity to base future characters off, and also for quality control.
Okay. So how would you treat the game now as an experience? Like, have you learned anything making this game?
Oh yeah. I learned a lot. In fact, right before you called, I was kind of thinking over that game, and I realized that that's probably the least valuable game I've ever made as far as profit is concerned. Mm-hmm. But it's also the single most valuable game out of the entire franchise. And the reason is because what I learned from Fnaf World is what is driving every single project going on right now. It is serving as the gemstone of quality control in my mind, and it has solidified exactly what I have to do going forward. If